Okay, so it is 2 o'clock in London, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the UK Jewish Fundraising Now, which is a virtual conference we've put together to support those who work in the Jewish charity sector through this most horrific of time that we're all going through, the COVID-19 crisis. Our aim is to build on the amazing work that Simi has already done with the Jewish Community Professionals Chat Facebook group, where it's a fantastic place to share and to help each other out. Simi, how are you doing?
Yeah, we're doing okay. I mean, fundraising for a hospital right now has never felt more fulfilling and important, but pressurized. And speaking to colleagues that are also fundraisers, it felt like a really good time to bring everyone together with a whole mix of emotions, a whole mix of pressures, to share, to be a community, and to see how we can all help each other through such an unprecedented time.
Yeah, I think that, there's so many things, our whole world is changing. It's been turned on its head, and we're going to hear from some guest speakers later in the about 50 minutes or hour or so. I have to apologize in advance. I think you can hear and see Simi okay. I think that perhaps I may have paused the screen, but we're trying to sort that out. So you don't need to see that much of me, but we're going to speak for an hour or so. Please send in your questions. If you're watching on the Facebook group, please send these in. And if you are watching on YouTube, please send these in. And hopefully we can pass these to our guest speakers. The areas we're going to cover today are fundraising through a crisis, issues about how to communicate your cause during a crisis and this crisis, and then finally spend some time on ourselves and our well-being in this scary and difficult time. And it is a scary and difficult time. All our families have been impacted. We may know members of our families who have been in hospital, or there may have been bereavements, or our friends. We're worried about our jobs. We're worried about our community. We're worried about everything. So let's share our worries. It's good to share. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ben Morrison. I'm a fundraising consultant. I've worked in fundraising for just over 20 years. Had the privilege to work for Shelter and Variety Club and Jewish Care and Whitesman UK. And now as a consultant, I work across the community and the wider fundraising community as well in the country and abroad. Simi, do you want to say a line or two about yourself for those who may not know you? But I'm sure everyone does.
I helped set up the communal professional Facebook group with Sam Clifford. In my day job, I fundraised for Shaare Zedek Hospital in Jerusalem. Before that, I worked at CST in the Government Affairs Department. And you don't need to hear more about me. I think we want to hear from the people that are going to impart some wisdom.
Absolutely. Okay. So what we are going to be what hopefully we're going to be doing is just to give you some advice, some tips, but also we want to hear from you. So please do send in your messages, your questions. And I'm delighted to, first of all the way from Connecticut in the United States, I'm going to introduce you to Stephen Meyers. Dr. Stephen Meyers is the author of Personalized Philanthropy. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
We've got a link. We'll send a link through about your book, which is called Crash the Fundraising Matrix, and you can buy that on Amazon. Hopefully our delivery drivers are still working. Stephen has been involved in philanthropy for many years, pioneered a new kind of charitable gift practice, delivering on planned giving. He was the vice president and a member of the management team at Whitesman Institute the Whitesman Institute's American Committee for 21 years. And he is a fantastic guy, a great fundraiser. I'm delighted that you've joined us this morning. So thank you. First of all, how are things in Connecticut, number one? And I think the question that I like to pose to you at the start is, can you tell us about fundraising through a crisis, particularly Jewish communal fundraising? What were your experiences and learning through 9/11 and through the 2007 and 8 fundraising crisis? So good morning, Stephen. Over to you in Connecticut.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be with you. I guess if I had to put a title on my conversation with you this morning, I think it would be something like Sirens and Solidarity. All of this seems to be happening in slow motion. As Ben mentioned, I was with the American Committee for the Weizmann Institute in the planned giving world for 21 years. Before that, I worked in the Jewish Home for the Elderly in Fairfield, Connecticut. And before that, I was a volunteer on the annual fundraising and other fundraising campaigns. So it seems that I've done all of my fundraising in the Jewish community. So if you ask the question, is there such a thing as Jewish fundraising? I guess there is. I had never really thought about it, although I always found myself kind of working in a Jewish tradition and also fundraising. And I think probably the two most formative events in my career were the 9/11 attack in New York, and I was in New York in our New York office at the time, and the 2008 financial crisis, where the bottom fell out and the money kind of came out of fundraising, and people had to figure out what they were going to do. So I always felt that there were two kind of competing cultures and two trends existing at the same time in fundraising. And the balance between these two is a dynamic one that keeps changing over time. And I think that having lived through the crisis pushed fundraising in a direction that it hadn't really been in before, especially noticeable, I felt, in the Jewish community. So the two trends, I think you could say, really two cultures, is the institution-focused culture on the one hand, and the donor-focused culture on the other. They're really in competition. In terms of the Jewish world, I think the institutional focus on culture is represented better than any other way by thinking about Jewish fundraising as the idea that you owe a Jewish tax. You have a Jewish tax. This is your obligation as a Jew to give. And so the fundraising that my grandfather did for his community was kind of based on, you make a call, you stand up, and leaders lead by asking other people to give their Jewish tax. And the way that you respond to the call from leadership is to be a good follower and pay your Jewish tax. And that was what fundraising was about. On the other hand, I think what's been developing over time was this notion that donors can also drive the philanthropic conversation. And when the sirens began the morning at 8:30 in the morning of 9/11 in New York, what was so unusual is that they never stopped, and they came from every direction. It was just a lot like it is now in so many ways, although the crisis now seems to be happening in slow motion. But at the same time, there was an element of solidarity that came out of this, where instead of the notion of Jewish tax, where fundraising was really kind of impersonal and an obligation, things began to develop around the notion that donors can also drive this conversation as well as institutional leaders. So the idea of leaders leading, meaning that could be donors and individual staff and everyone in the organization, all the people with a stake, the stakeholders could also lead both as a group and as individuals. So this kind of began to shift from the idea of a religious duty that you had to make a gift to one where you as an individual donor could have a compelling interest, and the organization that you cared about had a compelling need. And the job of the fundraiser then gradually over time, I think, shifted. Rather than just going in to take the money out of the donor, you have the money, we need it, and we'll tell you how we want to spend it, to this notion of what is your compelling interest as a donor, and how is that going to fit with one of the many compelling needs that we have in our organization. So that gift planning and fundraising then became a process of putting these things together, the meshing of compelling interest with compelling need. One of the things that began to drive this was the importance of bequests and planned giving, because at the same time that a charity had an immediate interest, it also would have a long-term interest. And the way to address the long-term interest was always thought to be to make a gift, a future gift, from your estate or from the assets remaining after you die to the endowment, and then that way you'd be able to have a legacy. But it's very hard to talk to donors about future gifts when the needs of the organization seem so immediate and pressing. So a whole new kind of fundraising and philanthropy needed to be developed. And ultimately for me, that came in the form of a book that I wrote called Personalized Philanthropy. And the model of personalized philanthropy comes from the notion in science of the idea of personalized medicine, where you're thinking about the right drug for the right person at the right time and the right dose. It's going to work every time because it's so finely tuned to that individual patient. And in fundraising, that's a radical idea. So it became very important for people to begin to think about how actually are you going to mesh these two interests, the interests of the donor with the interests of the charity, and how do leaders lead in this environment. So those are the thoughts that I've been thinking about over the last couple of days.
So Stephen, so it's connecting the need to the donor's interest. It's thinking about long term as well as short term.
Well, you have to figure out a way to hold both in your hand at the same time: the immediate interests of the organization for survival and the long-term interests. But when you're in the middle of a crisis environment, you've got to find a way to let people express their need to contribute, even though the means to contribute might not be at their immediate disposal. And so we're talking about Jewish fundraising a little bit here. So let me share one idea that I had about this and just introduce it, if we have a few minutes for that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think one of the things that made me think maybe there is a Jewish fundraising is that we can turn to metaphors that come from our tradition. And since Passover is coming up, it's a good time for me to remind you about the idea of the 4 children or the 4 sons. In this case, I've translated this idea over into the 4 donors. And if you remember, the idea of the 4 sons, 4 children, is that, again, you have two possibilities. One is that you can treat everyone equally and have one prescription that applies to all of these children, or all of your donors, if you will. Or you can think that each one of them has their own particular need. They're in their own particular space. They have their life. They're at a certain point in their life. And how do you connect with them where they are? And so the 4 children of the 4 donors is a perfect opportunity to do that. And using this as a kind of a profiling system is, how do you approach your donors where they are in their experience, especially during a crisis? So the four donors, the 4 children, seems particularly apt. So take a look at them for a second. You already know who they are. This is what's so great about our tradition. It can apply to this situation right now, and every year, every Passover as well. So you have the wicked. First, you have the wise. You have the wicked. You have the simple, and you have the what I call the donor who doesn't know how to ask. In the case of the wise donor, and we all know them, they're donors who give all the time without even being asked.
Mm-hmm.
just important for them to make a gift. They probably make many gifts during the year. They would be donors that you could think of as loyal donors. They have a high degree of loyalty in that they give over and over again on every occasion without even being asked. They're just there. We tend to take them for granted. We don't often think about them as our major donors, but there they are. Then there's a category that we already know is they're the wicked donors. And of course, they're not really wicked, but as donors, neither are the children, of course, but they kind of separate themselves from the community, from the others, in that they have a self-interest in mind. So if you have a donor who has an interest in, they'd like to make a gift, but they need to take care of themselves or their family. So in the US, we have charitable gift annuities, and you have different forms of trusts so that a donor can provide an income stream for themselves or for their spouse or for a child who might have a special need. That's one type of donor you could call wicked. Another type of donor would be a donor who is very data-driven. They want to make a gift, but they want you to show them exactly how it's going to be spent, and they'll want to see evidence of that you did the right thing with their money. So it's a very discerning, in a sense. They're wise, but they're wise in a different kind of a way. The simple donor doesn't want to be bothered with tax-wise or being smart about how they give. They just know maybe they have a tradition in their family that they always have a way of remembering the charity in their estate plan or in their will. They have something habitually that they will turn to be charitable. And most typically, you might think about that you'll be remembered in the will. That's where they would begin. You would approach that donor in a certain way. And finally, I think the one I like the most, means the most to me, is the donor who doesn't know how to ask. And it's a donor who has a charitable itch and inclination, and they don't know how to scratch it. For instance, could be a donor who acquired their money from the other members in their family. So their parents have died. Maybe they have another sibling who's died. They have a large estate that they came into money, and they don't know what to do with it, and they have a charitable inclination. So you can begin to help them phrase the questions and help them arrive at a way for them to give in a way that's most meaningful for them. This, as I mentioned at the beginning, if there's two threads, an institution-focused and a donor-focused, this clearly is the focus on the donor, where instead of offering the same plan, the same way of giving, the same approach to all donors, you would be able to fine-tune your approach that would suit for each donor. And instead of becoming a highly regarded specialist in your particular silo, whether it's annual giving or tax-related giving or plan giving, or I only work with major donors over the amount of X, they don't become important to me until they've already given a lot of money. This is not that. This is focusing on where each donor is at and how to optimize the impact for each donor, matching up their compelling interest and their compelling need. And these gifts can be made over a lifetime. These are habits of giving that are built up in the individual over their whole lifetime. So some people are going to give all the time. Some people are going to come to you with a bequest in their will already done. Where do you begin with them? So you want to bring together this multitude of different opportunities in a uniquely personal kind of a blended gift. And that's a specialty in fundraising called blended giving, or personalized philanthropy, which really has evolved, I think, out of all this crisis. And it provides an opportunity for leaders to give, whether they're individuals or whether they're donors or whether they're fundraisers, at whatever level they're at. So I think this is sort of the essence of Jewish fundraising. It's an opportunity for people to step forward at whatever point they are in their lives and connect with a larger community around them through one of these uniquely personal vehicles. So that's where I begin the conversation.
Stephen, thank you so much. I've learned so much over the last 14 minutes or so from that about blended gifts and personalized philanthropy. And yeah, maybe the Jewish community's approach to major donor giving, it can be a little bit Jewish tax, and it's something that I think that we should all look at very much so. Simi, do you have anything to add on this? Or is there any questions that you'd like to ask Stephen at this point? And we'll see if we've got any questions from, we've got quite a few people watching. Hello to everybody watching on Facebook and on YouTube. Sorry if the stream is a little lagging in places, but is there anything that you'd like to add on to this, Simi?
Thank you, Stephen. I was just going to ask one question, which is how do you see people being able to juggle their individual organizations' fundraising needs with that wider community? I mean, we don't have a federated system here, but people are certainly communally minded. And I just wanted to know if there was anything that you could share from your previous experience about how people can juggle those two sometimes conflicting, sometimes together hats of a communal thinker that works for a specific organization in crisis.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about what you are thinking when you ask the question. Are you thinking about the notion of organizations that are in crisis, or organizations that have been stable over a long time? I guess it's kind of going to depend on, like these 4 children, where is the organization at in its own evolution and its own development? Is it well connected to the community, or is it kind of marginalized at the edge? These are kind of questions I think that are important. How does that organization lead is kind of like, how does any leader lead? Where is your focus? So tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking.
It wasn't for a specific organization. It's just that I think a lot of people, because we're a small Jewish community in this country, most of the fundraisers know each other, have worked together, have possibly done each other's jobs at different points. And there is that pulling of the heart right now between, I need to raise the money for my organization if you are dealing with the initial impact of the current corona crisis, versus I need to think bigger picture here. What's our community going to look like a year down the line? And so what eggs am I putting my basket in? What baskets am I putting my eggs into, if that makes sense?
Now I really understand your question. Having worked for Weitzman for so long in New York, it was very interesting. From my first day on the job, I found that there were a large number of other Jewish organizations in New York that were, you could call them friends of Weitzman, friends of IDF, friends of Hebrew University, and so on and so on. And we actually formed a small group which we called ourselves the Jewish Plan Giving Group. And of course, everybody wanted to be a part of it, even if they weren't Jewish. But it was a place that we could share our ideas together and our concerns together. And we found, of course, that we had many donors in common. And so you have to kind of think, is this a zero-sum game? There's only so much money that can go around. And if I get a gift for my organization, that means that you won't get a gift for your organization. And so you're kind of working at odds with each other. And so in one sense, you have to figure out, how do you keep how do you work as a community that goes beyond your own individual community? This sort of journey outside yourself. This is like the joy of fundraising, journey outside yourself. So I can't tell you how many times that I would be working with one donor and another organization would be working with that same donor. So I guess I would go right back to that notion of, what is this donor's compelling interest that is going to match with our compelling need? So if they have a compelling interest and it's going to match better with your organization, I'm going to hook them up with you and your organization and that fundraiser. And having a relationship between these fundraisers is vital, because there's really, you have to have kind of, it's not a zero-sum game. Every gift amplifies the community for all of us. And if my organization is there for someone who has a focus on cancer research because their husband died from lung cancer, that's going to be our donor for that purpose. And if your organization is more an arts and community kind of a focus, that organization is going to be the right organization for that donor. So the idea of the right gift for the right purpose, for the right time, for the right donor, for the right organization, I think the answer is, to your question, is somewhere in there. Find the right gift for the right person, and don't try to poach somebody else's donor for your organization, especially if they don't have the right match of compelling interest and compelling need. So fundraising during this time, I think, is about not only what vehicle can you offer, make an outright gift to my organization, or do a trust to my organization, or put this organization in your will, is why? What do you hope to accomplish? And some of the giving strategies and giving vehicles that I use are compelling for donors, because almost everything that I do is to help the donor have an impact much sooner than they would otherwise be able to do with another type of a gift plan. And that has to do with how you think about endowment and how you think about annual giving versus plan giving and things like that. So you have to find the match of compelling interest, and then you have to find the right set of vehicles, the right blend of gifts to help the donor have the maximum amount of impact in the moment that they want to have it, and not put off the pie in the sky until you die. Your impact is much later, so we'll take care of that. You won't be here to see it. That is not the way that I like to work in a crisis. I like for each donor to feel that they're going to be able to have an impact that's very personal to them. It's going to be meaningful to them, and also meaningful to the organization. So you're not in a competition. You're really still part of a community, even though there's lots of different organizations in that environment. I don't know, does that begin to address your question?
That was great. Thank you.
Oh.
Fantastic, Stephen. I can see that we've got a number of people who are watching us on all the different channels. That's fantastic. Sorry again to everybody if I'm lagging behind, or if you're hearing my coughing. Thankfully, I'm getting over this bug. Stephen, thank you so much for the time being. If there's got any more questions, we're going to feed them through to you probably towards the end. But I'd like to now introduce our next speaker, who is Martin Kerem. So if Martin can come on the screen, he probably has, but I can't see it yet. And I just introduced you to Martin. So Martin is a specialist communications consultant and founder of Genium. Genium are a full-service creative agency and marketing consultancy. He's spent many years working in television and film, and he's got a real great understanding of communication. And I've worked with him on a couple of times on some projects. And Martin, I know that you're working with some NHS clients at the moment.
Yes.
So it'd be fantastic if you could tell us a little bit about this, and how the world is zooming around on Zoom, etc., and digital. However, but also what I'd really like you to help the people who are watching is, everybody seems to be panicking, saying we need to do an emergency appeal. But we may not, as a charity, be so relevant to coronavirus. So what tips would you have to those charities that maybe aren't frontline looking after vulnerable people, but want to come across as authentic? So if you mention a bit about the NHS, talk about digital stuff, and then how about authentic? And I'll hand over to you. There we go, Martin. So thank you very much for your time, Martin.
No problem. We're busy working with a number of NHS trusts and other charities, but we're also working on with companies that are trying to make a difference and looking at products and inventions that will help during this crisis. Things like infrared temperature gauges in a helmet. But the NHS work that we're doing is with some of the NHS trusts and their charities. So the Royal Free charity we're working with at the moment, and we've only just recently launched their COVID emergency fund campaign. In 2 to 3 days, we've already raised nearly $500,000, which is amazing, and a lot of them are new donors. There are 2 major donors from people that they do know, but there are a lot of new donors. And what they're trying to do different from what they have done in the past is really making an impact using social media, and trying to understand their audience and grow their audience, and using their volunteers and community to share as ambassadors. And I know just following on from what Stephen was saying, and your next question, Ben, was about the relevant gift. And the relevant gift for the right person at the right time, I think, is exactly the right message that Stephen was given, which was about your charity at the moment may not necessarily be the charity that is reacting at the moment to the epidemic, and so the donors may be interested more in donating to charities that, and their gift may be more relevant to those that are on the front end of this epidemic at the moment. And so I think what's really, really important in everything that we do is around really understanding your audience and understanding who your audience is. So much so that you can picture them. And I know in our small Jewish community, we often know who our traditional donors may be, but we haven't necessarily communicated with ones that may not necessarily be those small group of major donors, and how to reach them and where are they now. And we know where they are. They're all at home. And so they're online. So they're looking at us through social media, and they're also where before the crisis, people may have ignored or not looked at emails, for example. I think people are reading emails now. People are wanting that little bit of communication. And I think personalized messages is really key. So spending a bit of time and writing emails to individuals on your who are your normal donors. So focusing on your traditional donors initially, and writing them personal messages, and then trying to use the digital platform and technology to link in different methods of giving, so different ideas of ways of giving. But if you are a charity that is not on the front end, then there's no reason why you can't just tell people that you're still here, that your traditional donors, that you're still around and you're still there for people to communicate with you. And do that digitally, of course, but then store up a campaign and store up your information for after the campaign, the crisis, because there will be an end, and it's about preparing for what happens after the epidemic and when we can socially interact again. And it's going back then to looking at ways of physically social interacting. So things like the traditional Jewish dinners, charity dinners that we had, maybe it's a different focus on it. Maybe they're smaller, more intimate dinners, and maybe it's more focused on something that is about well-being and mental health. So you're adding an additional level, and Sophia, I'm sure we'll talk about that later. And I think it's about adapting your traditional forms of communication. So the things that you would normally send out, a printed invitation or printed things, use technology, use the digital side of things to help you communicate, and send out messages on Facebook and Twitter and social media. And even if it's just a short clip of you talking to your donors and talking to your audience, And then linked to what Stephen was saying about a collaborative process, share other fundraisers who are on the front line, share their need with your donors, because your donors might also be interested in, at this point in time, supporting them. And I think it's worth working together with other fundraisers and working together. And it's just another form of communication. I think also it's about pivoting what you currently are fundraising for, so what your current need is, and seeing how you can reach out to your audience in maybe a different way. So, for example, if you are an arts charity, maybe it's worth you doing a virtual tour of some artwork, and offering that live, or offering that as a film on YouTube. Or it might be using Zoom. Everyone's on Zoom at the moment, but there are many kind of video conferencing tools, things like house party as well. So instead of having a live dinner, there's no reason why you can't have an intimate dinner through virtual. So you can organize with because we know the Jewish caterers are still working, organize with one of the Jewish caterers to send out a takeaway at a particular time to everyone. So they're catering for an event, and then go on house party and have the dinner together. And then you can tell people about your charity and what you may be trying to raise funds for. I think very much it's about focusing also for some charities around after. What's going to happen after the epidemic? And I mentioned that before, but it's around giving our small community more than what they're used to. So from a dinner, they got a dinner and they were used to networking. But usually at all of these dinners, it's the same people there. Often it's the same people. And so the networking opportunity was not necessarily there. But if you're giving them something else, possibly something around wellness or a TED Talk type event where they're learning something, getting Stephen on to talk to them maybe could be really, really beneficial. So they're learning something from it. I think everything about communication is about being clear. It's about knowing who your audience is, being able to communicate in a very clear way and succinct way, especially using social media, and use technology. I know it may seem scary to some, but actually after a small period of time, spend some time learning about it and use it. And then from a technological tool perspective, use tools that can help you analyze your data on social media, something like Hootsuite or Sprout Social. What it can do is help you with your communication online, or use organizations like us, like Genium, where we can help you develop your communication and understand how you need to do it from a strategic perspective. But going back, it's all about planning. Even during this period now, we have had to run and react very quickly during this crisis period. But we need to always build in a period of planning, because communication can go wrong, and we don't want it to go wrong, and we don't want to have to fix it whenever we communicate. We need to try and plan and make sure that we have the right message, and we understand who we are as a charity, we understand what our ask is, and we keep it clear that we have one call for action. Make it very, very simple. We're just asking for one thing, and that really helps the audience tap into it. Ben and Simi, did you have any questions?
I'm just going to say something about collaboration, because I think that and technology, because if it wasn't for collaboration and technology, this wouldn't be happening. So
Exactly.
I want to thank Simi for what she's done on the Facebook group, and I've got to thank Adam Bradley, who is producing this, and him and I have had to learn how to use this technology, which may not be working so well for me. I think it's to do with my Wi-Fi and where I am. Maybe the Wi-Fi in Edgware isn't as strong as it is in other parts of London. I don't know. It could just be a Jewish community conspiracy. But at least, and it's great. We've got some great things in our community when it comes to collaboration. We've got the Maccabi Fun Run that I was proudly involved in helping set up 13 years ago. There's been the Jewish News Nuts Heroes. There's been award ceremonies. There's been, there's cross-working all over the place. And I think more, please everybody watching this, let's do more together. Simi, did you have anything directly to ask to Martin?
So one question that's come up recently for charities, including my own, is where you have an aging demographic. We're quite an old community where you don't have people's email addresses, and it doesn't feel right to be phoning people to ask for money right now. Is there a way of engaging with people that feels right in this kind of uncomfortable time?
I think, Simi, I don't think it's a problem to be calling people. So phoning them and checking that they're okay, especially with an aged community, is asking them if they're okay and just saying that you're around, and not asking them necessarily for funding right now unless you're part of a crisis, you're on the front line of this situation. But using technology like phone, because they often have phone, but also there's no reason why you can't be sending a package to them. So there are often a lot of elderly people who can't go out at all, who've been told not to go out. Sending them a food basket, and a little message in the food basket is something that you're giving back to them, and it after the crisis will be really remembered, and they will then support you. I think also you'd be surprised. There are many silver surfers out there, and there are lots of people who are much older. My dad, who's in his 80s, is online and WhatsApping, and so I think. I think even with an aged, I don't think we should take them for granted that they're not online. The largest demographic on Facebook are over 35, and they're getting older on Facebook. And I think it's worth really understanding that the communication can be used digitally. If you are going for an older group, then Facebook is the right place to go. A younger group and a more general group, you need to be using visual communications such as photography and film through Instagram. And for a more general but slightly younger, it's Twitter. So I think Facebook is the right audience for an older group, but there are many ways that you can take the current climate and reach out to your older donors in a different way. And I think that there are ways, innovative ways that you can do this.
Yeah, I mean, we've got people responding to what you said. CCJ, which is the Council of Christian Jews, is calling every member just to say Happy Easter and Pesach. We've been calling the donors that we know that are quite isolated to look after them and doing shopping for people and all sorts of things. So that sense of community is definitely coming out. There was just another question about the use of virtual messaging and Zoom and things like that. Do you agree that Zoom and other virtual messaging seems so much more intense than previously?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there are a lot more people using it now, and I don't think it's a bad thing. It is intense, and sometimes can be quite annoying if you're getting more and more used to it, and sometimes it's the only go-to. So it's the type of communication that, all right, instead of having a phone call, we'll have a Zoom conference. And actually, a phone call is the right method of communication at the time, rather than a Zoom conference, a conference call. I think, yeah, I mean, it can be intense, but I think also it gives a really honest view of people, because you're seeing their face and you often seeing their lounge and the space in which they live in and work and are in. And I think that's quite interesting to an audience. I don't know. Simi, what do you think? I mean, from your perspective, what do you think? Is it? I mean, it has been quite heightened.
Yeah, I mean, from my team personally, we've tried not to overdo the video calls, and only meetings that we would have had face to face are we doing by video. And it's really streamlined. The emails have actually gone down rather than over the top, because people are thinking more about their communication. So it's been a little bit of a blessing from a communications perspective, because people really are thinking before they just hit send or do pick up the phone, where they might have just sent a cheeky email before. So I'm seeing it working very positively.
Yeah, I think it's, with all communication, it's about that clarity. And often people hit send before they think about it. And what this is doing is it's allowing us time to think, and so that we have the time to think now, and to maybe ask questions to your spouse or your family around you, and then answer. You know, it's really interesting, I think, during this crisis, especially about being at home, that your family are part of your workforce effectively now. Because they're, you know, so it's about asking your children and your spouses about work things, and there's more communication hopefully at home, and it's, I know it's maybe Sophia will say from a mental well-being perspective that delineation between work and home has become completely marred now, and I think there needs to be a space for both, but I think on the one hand, from a thinking perspective, it's really healthy. It's really healthy. I've got my son is here with me, and he's busy. So he's busy drawing pictures about this conference we're having. So there you go.
It's showing the human side of people. Which,
exactly.
When you're trying to do a job professionally, people put up this veneer of perfection that is slipping in a brilliant way. And it's okay for you to have kids in the background, and also not to get everything right. You know, with the technology, we're all trying our best. And I think people can appreciate that better than they ever have before.
That's right. I think the main thing is about how do you protect your children when you're having possibly professional, intense conversations. How do you do that? And how do you find that space? So I think there is a balance, and also a balance about switching off. You know, I promote using technology. We're a digital agency, so we use technology all the time, but it is about that kind of balance between the organic and the digital, and spending some time with the technology switched off as well. That's really, really important.
It's very important.
I'm kind of stretching now into Sophia's territory. I don't want to go there.
Absolutely, Martin. Thank you so much. I think that, you know, there's so much in what you said, and you have mentioned Sophia. And just before Simi introduces Sophia, I just want to comment on the thing that you said about obviously when you're doing a Zoom or when you're doing something like this, you can see where people live. And you think, oh, that's a nice way to decorate your lounge. I hadn't quite thought of that before. You know, it's great to get ideas, but you do see people as people rather than as donor numbers or as donor names or just addresses. And you can actually put faces to the names that perhaps you've always just filled out on a form, but you don't know them. So, Martin, thank you so much for that. Simi, over to you.
Okay, so Sophia Davis is our next speaker. Sophia is a coach who I've personally worked with, and she's been working with human behavior and the philosophy of thought for 12 years. She now also teaches mindfulness and meditation to support people to find peace of mind in the now. Sophia, you've been listening to this whole call, so rather than me bombard you with thousands of questions, I just wanted to start with if you had any initial reactions to the kind of things that are being shared already.
Thanks, Simi. I do actually. Hi, everyone. What an amazing call this is. And I've so enjoyed listening to Stephen and Martin sharing their perspectives, and I'm sure you all have as well. Something very interesting that I noticed just generally was there's a theme that's emerging. I'm sure everyone's probably noticed, but the theme is just simply being more human. Recognizing that people aren't just organizations or donors or whatnot, that they're people. We're not just professionals, we're people. And from my perspective, this has been missing for a very, very long time, the human aspect. And I loved it so much, Martin, that you shared that your son was there, because why shouldn't your son be there? It's very natural that your son would be there, and we can all appreciate that would be what's needed right now. And I also just saw a comment from someone saying they used a fluffy pen, their son or daughter's fluffy pen yesterday. And why not? Why shouldn't we? Because it doesn't take anything away from us, from who we are and what we do and what we have to offer in this world. And if anything, this that is happening right now is providing us with the most enormous opportunity to do things differently. And we can't take away the fact that people give because they enjoy giving. Of course, people give for other reasons also, but generally we love to give. We love to contribute. We can see the value more than ever in entertainment, in arts, in culture, in everything, because it's something that has basically been taken away from us. We can see the value in things that we couldn't before, and we're all feeling this enormous pressure of not knowing. We don't know what's going to happen. But something that really stood out to me that I do just want to mention is this idea around lack. We are coming with the assumption that there isn't enough because we're seeing the situation, and we're immediately making or drawing the conclusion that people don't have enough, and so therefore they're now not going to give. Now, whilst it's wise to, of course, address this and to consider this and to see what it is that potentially we're being faced with, what came to mind throughout this call was the toilet roll situation as a result of this crisis, which has been not just in England and London specifically, but all over the world, the shopping situation, we could say, where there has been the assumption that there won't be enough. And so the fear then rises in response to that assumption. And then we go out and take everything. And then, of course, there isn't enough. But actually, there was enough. There was enough to begin with. And if we hadn't allowed our fear to kind of completely consume us, we wouldn't have overbought, and therefore everybody would have had enough. And I kind of feel like it's pretty much a similar situation that we have now. Maybe there is still enough. Maybe we shouldn't come with the assumption that there's a lack or that people now don't want to donate. Perhaps they want to donate more than ever before. Perhaps their hearts are open more than they've ever been. And actually what's needed is for us to come back into this place of clarity, into this place of recognition that, okay, we don't know. So the best that we can do is assume that people are experiencing what we are, which is a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty. But together we can establish what's still possible. So that's kind of, those were my initial thoughts, Simi, if that's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. The toilet roll analogy is a pertinent and interesting one. I think that every fundraiser has a different role at the moment. Some people are being asked to go out and make as much money as possible because they're working on the front line with the pandemic. And other people might be sitting there frustrated because they can see their value, but they're being told to step back. And so I wonder if there's anything that you could offer to people for who they are in their role rather than the organization, of how to deal with that panic situation for them at work.
Yeah, I mean, what I really feel to say about this is that, again, we're all being given the most enormous opportunity to slow down. Now, whilst it doesn't feel like a big opportunity for people who have just lost their jobs or who are panicking that they're not going to be able to be proactive in their roles, actually, it's the hugest opportunity that we have never had before to come into ourselves and find a place of clarity where we can think about what's actually needed. When we're in total panic and when we give way to this place of terror inside of us, which is very easy to do, when we do that, we lose all capacity to be creative, all capacity to think outside of the box, all capacity to think clearly. And then nothing happens and the panic just kind of escalates and gets worse. And then we just become frozen. It's not helpful. It's not helpful to anyone. So if somebody is in a position right now where they're being asked to kind of step back, I would say step back and find a way to be with what you're being asked, because there is no point in fighting the reality, right? There's absolutely no point in that. The reality is what we're being faced with. Now, the fighting of the reality is what is causing us a great deal of suffering, and that supports no one. Now, one of the themes that's come up a number of times on this call is collaboration, the need to work together. So perhaps even though somebody's been asked to step back, there is still a way that we can collaborate, we can help each other, from a place not of terror and fear, but actually of giving and openness, which in turn brings so much nourishment and richness into your life. And that would generally serve us all kind of in such a more powerful way than just being terrified and kind of acting from this place of desperately trying to scramble up from the position that we're in when we know that we just can't do that right now.
Yeah. And going back to what Martin said about work-life balance and digital connecting people, but also consuming people now. I mean, people always used to complain that if you've got your emails on your phone and you've got a mobile phone that you're always available for work, but actually that seems to have gone, into overdrive. How can people try and find a balance when they are working full-time, are doing full-time childcare, are surrounded by their family, and I'm working in my bedroom right now. So how can people find that space to breathe in all of this?
So yeah, thanks, Simi. That's a really good question. So what I would say is that most people generally don't have any space to breathe anyway, because even if the situation wasn't what the situation is now, we still generally feel overstretched. We're still generally doing a million things. And in the space that we used to have, we would fill that space up anyway. So we have to kind of question, well, where is space? Because perhaps space isn't really anything to do with what's going on the outside, because no one had space before. And now for a different reason, no one has space now. But now we have a reason seemingly that we don't have space. Now, of course, there are physical challenges. You're working full time. Some people are homeschooling a lot of people are homeschooling their children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have to find a place within ourselves where there is spaciousness. Now, there is a quote that's coming to mind, and I actually can't remember the exact quote, but it's a quote from Viktor Frankl. And it was along these lines. And basically what he said is the only true freedom we ever have is the freedom within, the freedom of the way that we choose to think. Now, at the moment, this is the choice that we are being presented with. We don't know what's going to happen. The situation is that we do have a lot to do, that we don't have very much physical time and physical space. However, we don't need to compound that by overthinking. We don't need to compound that by following trains of catastrophic thinking that make us feel incredibly anxious and unable to do our general tasks. We don't need to compound that by overdoing when we don't need to, recognizing when we're doing things out of a place of fear and terror, and when actually we could take a step back and lean back a little bit and just take a breath, or when we don't need to always entertain our children or be specifically there with them physically. It's okay for them to get along with things sometimes, depending obviously on their age. So it's about really looking for the inner space and looking for where the mind is taking up most of the space. And I can elaborate on that, Simi, if you feel that that's necessary, because I know you've worked with me and a lot of people haven't. So
yeah, a little bit more would be great, actually.
So what tends to happen is when we talk about space, we look at it and we think, I haven't got enough time off, or I need a holiday, or I need a break, or I need some time without the children, or I need some private space. And whilst that may be true, what we're actually looking for is we're looking for internal space. So we're looking for a bit of peace of mind, which is why we enjoy going on holiday, because the change of environment enables us to actually relax our nervous system. And when our nervous system is relaxed, it brings about a sense of spaciousness inside of ourselves. So what's happened at the moment is we're faced with a crisis, a global crisis. So immediately the whole world has gone into fight or flight mode. So their nervous system is overworking. It's working as though we're being directly chased by tigers. And whilst there's a very real threat, we could say, that is occurring, the nervous system hasn't quite registered that in this moment, in this now, we're okay. And this is what brings about a sense of relief within the nervous system, within the body. This is exactly what enables us to find that breath, that, okay. So what I would suggest is if everyone just takes a look around their room where they are right now and just recognize you're safe, just in this moment, just to take a look wherever you are, whoever's around, whether it's a family member, whether you're not alone in the room or you are, it doesn't matter. If you just let your body register that it's safe in this moment, right now, everything's okay. What happens is the whole system starts to regulate, starts to down regulate. You become aware of your breathing again. You can increase your outward breath. And then slowly, a sense of spaciousness comes back from within ourselves. And then the way we respond to life, following on from that, reflects the spaciousness that we're finding within. The other thing, if we're watching our thoughts, if we start to notice how active our thinking is, you'll start to see why there's no spaciousness. And it isn't to do with being with your children or your husband or your wife 24/7. It's actually to do with the constant thinking about it, the constant worrying about what's going to happen, the constant catastrophic thinking, the constant assumption, the constant conclusions, the constant fears. And this is what's removing the sense of spaciousness. And this is what really we need to start bringing back.
Brilliant. And the last thing that I was going to ask you before we see if there are any more questions before we wrap it up was about distraction. So when people are panicked or scared, they tend to tell themselves they like to keep busy. Whether that's, you go on Facebook just to have a look at what's going on, and you might look up and it's an hour later. And I just wondered if there was anything you wanted to offer about people being aware of using distraction at a time like this.
Yeah, so this is really important. And I really encourage everyone to listen to this really intently, because the reason that we distract ourselves is because we are avoiding how we feel. Now, it takes an enormous amount of energy to hold the way we feel down. So we do absolutely everything we can in our power to stay busy so that we don't feel the fear or the anxiety or the grief or the not knowing or the uncertainty or whatever it is that you're feeling. Now, again, just relating back to spaciousness and just finding some space. For as long as we are doing that, for as long as we are holding our feelings down, for as long as we are not willing to feel the way we actually feel, we are going to just live life on full, at our total capacity, impatient, agitated, on this kind of hamster wheel that we just can't get off of. And it is not the answer. If we are distracting ourselves, we have to stop, even if it's for 5 minutes, and ask ourselves, what do I not want to feel? What am I avoiding feeling? Often it's grief, because underneath the fear, you're going to find a lot of grief. There is, of course, also the fear. But when you just sit with it, just for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you have, all of that can start to move through your system, and you will feel so much better. It is not the answer to distract yourselves. It never will be. And when Simi said at the beginning that part of my work is about finding peace of mind in the now, a lot of that has to do with learning how to be with feeling, learning how not to avoid our humanity, our very basic need to feel. And when we start to feel more comfortable with our emotions, when we start to feel more comfortable with feeling, when we learn how to become present with what's actually going on for us now, the result is the deepest peace that I could express to you. And it is discoverable. It's not something you have to wait, a year to find. It's something that you can all experience right now. And I don't know if we've got time, Simi, but I could take people through a very quick process that would enable this.
Ben is my boss right now. You tell me, Ben, how we're doing for time.
I can't hear Ben.
I can't hear Ben either. Get to take over.
Sorry. Hello. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
As I said, the Edgeware Wi-Fi isn't working. Everybody who's been with us is still with us from the beginning. So thank you to everybody who's watching this on YouTube and on Facebook. So we do have some time if everybody is happy to stay where they're watching this. And as Sophia said, you could be sitting around the kitchen table, or in your bedroom, or in the quiet room, the quietest room you can. And we're so grateful and thankful for you for joining us all today. So yeah, Sophia, if you'd like to just spend a couple of minutes, and then please post some questions for the panel on Facebook. I think, and then we should be able to ask her maybe one question each, and then we'll wrap up. So over to you, Sophia.
That would be beautiful. So I'm just going to ask everyone, just wherever you are, just to start becoming aware of your body. Something that may sound very obvious, but when we're very stressed and when we're feeling very scared, we lose touch with our body. We lose all sensation. We lose all awareness that we're in a body. So I just ask everyone to, and we're going to do it in kind of muscle groups, just become aware of your feet and just begin feeling the sensations in your feet. Now, if you are in a situation where you can close your eyes, do. And if not, that's completely fine. But just become aware of your feet, how you feel inside your feet. And then move up to your ankles. And then your shins and your calves. Just feeling the inside of your body. Your knees and the backs of your knees. And just internally, you can just say, just relax. As you get to the muscle group, just say, just relax. Then your thighs, the backs of your legs. Feeling the insides of your hips and your pelvis. Just notice, just to see if you're actually sitting on your seat. Oftentimes, we're not actually sitting down in our pelvis. We're almost pulling ourselves up. So just sit down in the pelvis. Begin to feel the lower belly and the back, the lower back. And then the middle belly and the middle back. And then I just want you to rest on the center of your chest just for a moment, just feeling the inside of the center of your chest. And it's often where we're feeling a lot of tightness, a lot of fear. But see if you can just notice your heartbeat and just gently say relax, just on the inside, just relax. And then feeling the back, the top of the back and the shoulders, the shoulder blades, all the way down the arms and the hands. Moving to the neck and the throat. And then the inside of the head and the face, just feeling the whole body from the top of the head all the way to the tips of the toes, and just give yourself the message on the inside, I'm okay, it's okay. And just notice how your body responds to that message. And just notice while you're sitting here, whether your eyes are open or closed, how fast the mind is running or how much it's slowed down. And then notice your breathing and come back into the room whilst keeping your awareness on the inside of your body. And in this moment, just remind yourself that everything's okay. Nothing needs to change in this moment. Just in this moment, just give yourselves one moment, 1 minute, where you can just allow everything to just be as it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia. I'm feeling much more relaxed after that. I hope other people are too. We've had a couple of comments from people. Somebody's been amazing enough to share that their issue is that they distract themselves and that it's a control mechanism, and they've set themselves an isolation challenge to learn to be at peace with not having a task in hand. So thank you so much for helping people to come to those realizations.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here.
Okay, this is fantastic. It's been. I've got to wake myself up again because that was so relaxing. I think I'm going to record your voice. And, absolutely. Thank you to you, and thank you to all our guests. We're just taking a few seconds just to see if we've got any questions that we can ask everybody that are coming through on the stream. Which and again, I apologise about the technical difficulties we've had today. If not, I would just like to personally thank. Yeah, Sophia, I think I need to do this one time a day. Absolutely, I agree with that. With that sentiment. This has been fantastic. I wanted to bring people together. Wanted to share some advice. Wanted to tell people that you're not alone. That we are part of a community. We've learned today about collaboration. It'd be fantastic if we can collaborate more. We'd definitely like to do more of these. So please let me know or let Simi know in the comments or on my YouTube channel, Ben Morrison Consulting, of the type of things you'd like to hear. I think we've been blessed to have 3 top speakers joining us today for our first pioneering pilot video. So I'd like to thank Stephen from joining us all the way from Connecticut, from Martin, probably slightly nearer, and Sophia, I know you're quite a long way away in the UK, so I hope the 3 of you remain and your families remain safe and well.
Thank you.
And Simi, thank you to you for being such a great part of this with me. I think I muted this idea to you last week, and this isn't your day job, and you've spent so much time with everything else that you've got in your busy life helping with this. So this is the first UK Jewish Fundraising Now virtual conference. Simi, thank you so much. Also, thank you to Adam Bradley, who's been producing this. I'm going to put all the links on the Facebook page, if that's okay with Simi, and my YouTube channel, which will link to all our speakers. And I think that also Stephen's got his book on Amazon, and also he's got something about the four types of donors relating to the Passover, the Pesach Seder, that we can put on as a PDF. So I'll say thank you. And Simi, anything you'd like to add?
Well, Ben, I wanted to thank you because when we set up the Facebook group originally, you were one of the first people to get in touch to see how you could help bring people together. And here we are. in a time of global crisis, and we're finding ways to support each other as a community, which is really what the spirit of our community is all about. So thank you so much. The last thing that I wanted to ask people to do is to say thank you for being so open with some of the comments that you've shared today. And I hope you'll see in the Facebook group that the more that you're able to offer in terms of requests for help and things that you want to share, the more people are willing to share with you. So please do use the Facebook group. It's been created for all of you. And I look forward to seeing you all there sometime soon.
Great. Fantastic. So have a lovely Pesach, everybody. We'll come back after Pesach with episode 2. Sending our prayers and our thoughts and our best wishes to all those who are in our community and wider who are not well. Stay safe, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you so much for your time today. Bye-bye.
Bye.